Hey everyone, how are you doing? Hope everything's awesome. Welcome to the final discussion or assignment that we are doing in class. I think as a discussion. So anyway, that's what I'm going to say it is. It's the chapter presentation assignment, and mine is on trust and deception. And I am Cheryl, if I didn't already say that, and I am going to cover chapter 9. So I look forward to telling you all about it. So now let's move this ahead. Okay, so all of chapter 9 covers a bunch of different topics, and these are all of the topics that are covered in the actual chapter. So, trust and deception is the main theme of everything. We have the cost benefit theory. We have supportive and defensive interpersonal climates, lying in interpersonal relationships, effects of culture and gender on trust, effects of technology and media on trust, and developing trust best practices. Now, today, I'm only going to focus on a few focal points of the chapter, which I found interesting. So, we're going to go into trust. I am going to cover deception, but that will be a little later. Then we're going to go into the cost benefit theory. We're going to talk about the supportive and defensive interpersonal climates, and really cooperative and competitive communications and behaviors. So we'll talk a little bit about that as they relate to defensive interpersonal climates, lying in interpersonal relationships and what the actual impact of that is. We'll talk about the takeaways and the summary of the discussion today, and really what we can do better. Okay, so let's dive in. Trust. What is it? I would say, well, there's definitely a definition here from the textbook, which is called Interpersonal Communications by Terry and Michael Gamble. And I should note that my presentation has a bunch of quotes from that textbook for when it comes to definitions and things like that. So it's definitely noted in here, but I'm physically saying or verbalizing the actual book where the source where it's coming from. So just letting you know ahead of time. Okay, so trust is the belief that you can depend on another person to act in your best interest. It consists of two basic components, trusting behavior and trustworthy behavior. So what does that really mean? Trusting behavior is behavior that accords with the belief that another will not take advantage of one's vulnerabilities. And then trustworthy behavior is behavior that does not take advantage of another's vulnerabilities. So it sounds very similar, but really it's kind of like everything intertwines to create trust between people. I think one of the key words here is vulnerabilities, and I definitely will talk a little bit more about that as we continue the presentation. But yeah, you have to kind of be vulnerable to engage in trust. But trust is hard. It's totally risky because you have to let somebody else, you have to be vulnerable to allow for someone else to trust you and for you to trust someone. I really liked the quote from our textbook when it came to this. It says, trust is like interpersonal glue. I thought that was a great quote. And it says, when it's present, parties psychologically stick together. I think also, just in addition to what the book says, certainly you can physically stick together as well here. And I think that that's also a main thing too, but it's not really mentioned in this particular segment. The relationship is perceived to have value. When it's missing, however, the potential costs of the relationship are perceived to outweigh its potential benefits. So I'd love to dive a little bit more into that because that is really what the cost benefit theory is all about. So let's move ahead. Okay, so the cost benefit theory is also called the social exchange theory, and it's a theory that states that we work to sustain relationships that give us the greatest total benefit, and that a relationship will be sustained only as long as perceived benefits outweigh emotional expenditures. I said it's also known as the exchange theory or the social exchange theory. Let me go back. The basic formula for this and why you can prove it is because it is a formula. it's perceived relationship rewards minus perceived relationship costs equal perceived relationship benefits. So what I get minus what I put out is X, and then you can ask yourself, is it worth it? And that's what you get to decide in any kind of relationship. So I think a great example of this is any kind of interpersonal relationship that you have with anyone, really. You can decide, am I really giving too much? Or is this really equal? Is what I get beneficial to me in terms of what I put out? And I do think that is how people operate. So I do think it's a theory that proves true. Certainly, you can totally test it. So I think you can decide whether or not it works for you. But I think one of the main points is you get to make a decision too around what you want to do when with that relationship, when you decide whether or not it's beneficial to you or not. So you can leave it, you can keep it, and I think that's a really good way to measure if a relationship is working. You can ask yourself these questions. Okay, moving into competition versus cooperation in relationships. So this is the climate kind of piece of my discussion. So I ask a question, is competition in interpersonal relationships healthy when it relates to building trust? And the answer is not really. Relationships that are defined as competitive are associated with defensive and threatening communication and behavior. Cooperation is key in building trust and successful interpersonal relationships. The behaviors associated yield positive results such as honesty and support. Cooperation or cooperative relationships do not depend on one person gaining an edge over the other and do not promote defensiveness or lying. So you can see here that competition and cooperation in relationships, cooperation works much better or is healthier when it comes to exchanging information or engaging in interpersonal relationships. So one-upping or doing the whole competitive thing doesn't really work, which is fascinating to me because I think in the workplace, it's set up for you to be competitive with others. So I can't really go into too much detail around that, but I do think it's worth noting that our society doesn't necessarily support cooperation in relationships always, in all circumstances. So I think that's an important thing to note. Okay, now here, this is just a bunch of different behaviors and communications associated with a defensive climate characteristic. So meaning kind of like a competitive environment. So I noticed that in the textbook, it had a lot of information and a couple of key behaviors were things like keeping really long eye contact and putting your hands on your hips were behaviors associated with these defensive communication and behavior characteristics, which again can totally be associated with competition. Let's move ahead to supportive communication and behavioral climate characteristics. So what was interesting about reading about this is that all of these things and behaviors and characteristics on this side or on the supportive side were very similar, but they were different in terms of the action associated. So in this case, it's comfortable eye contact, neutral statements, leaning your body forward, so not hands on hips, but leaning your body forward, but they still had to do with your eyes and your body. So I thought that was interesting. I think a really interesting piece of supportive communication and behavioral climate characteristics is equality in order to build trust and having kind of a same elevation when you're standing with somebody. I thought that was interesting. I never even thought about that. So learned something new about that. Okay, trust can be easily destroyed, and let's move into why. Because of deception. So, lies, we all lie, we totally do. Deception or the effort to manipulate the truth affects the nature and outcomes of relationships, so not great. All lies help us negotiate situations that expose us to levels of vulnerability exceeding our comfort zones. And 100% of dating couples, this was a stat I thought was really interesting, reported lying to each other in about 1/3 of their conversations. So people lie 100%. And so I think that was I mean, pretty interesting stat. So basically proves that we all lie. Yes, we do. I think I don't think we realize or recognize how much we lie. So being aware of it is also a great way for us to be able to kind of understand and maybe stop those behaviors. Now, some of us lie, I think, more than others, but I think, of course, there's all kinds of different kind of lies, like big ones, small ones, white lies, everything in between. But either way, I think the point here is that anything that you lie about is not the truth. So it really impacts trust, no matter which way you spin it. And that leads me into what's the impact of lying. So it can destroy the very basis of a relationship, which is the trust, I think, is the underlying piece for any relationship to be able to actually work. So I think that, the impact of lying, it can destroy everything. So why do it? Okay, moving right along. What are the takeaways from this chapter? Trust is risky, it's hard, it's scary. Yes, it totally is. Do we need it to create effective interpersonal relationships? Yes, we totally do. Cooperation defeats competition when it comes to interpersonal relationships and building trust. Really important to be cooperative with people instead of competing with each other in order to build trust and have an effective relationship. Should we actively look at our relationships and evaluate according to the social exchange theory? Yes, we should always ask ourselves what's going on in our relationships and look at them, and we now have a formula that helps us to determine whether or not something's healthy or not. Okay, what can we do better? We can this is really a note to myself. I'll tell you guys too, or you guys and gals, okay, everyone. I have a challenge with trust, and it's why I picked it. And so I think it's kind of like the note to myself and maybe a note to others, but I like to tell myself to allow myself to be vulnerable with caution, probably extreme caution in my case, and allow others into your world. It matters. In order to develop and build trusting, successful, and meaningful relationships, you need to allow for some level of vulnerability. It might just be reciprocated. So meaning, having a relationship can be mutually beneficial and wonderful, and there are wonderful things you can do if you can build trust. So that completes my presentation today, and I hope you enjoyed it. And thanks so much. Take care. Bye-bye.